Welcome to the APSCo Transformation Zone. My name's Steve Carter. I'm one of the founders of the Satori Partnership and an industry veteran of almost 40 years. And really look forward to sharing some insights with you and maybe some new ideas and really challenge your thinking around some of the topics that we'll be presenting over the weeks ahead. Today, we want to talk about the question, if AI is the solution, what is the problem? And it's a really interesting way to pose that question because all I hear at the moment is everything's AI. And ultimately, why is it AI and what problem is it trying to solve? I think that's a fundamental question that we need to ask before we all get caught up on the roundabout of let's just get as many shiny new pieces of AI into the business as we can and really understand what it's going to be doing for us and what are the benefits. So we're at a critical crossroads because the way the market's working is changing, and it's changing for both internal and external reasons. I mean, the economy hasn't been kind to the sector over the last few years. Candidates are looking for different ways of working and different ways to get access to jobs, and that isn't always through an agency as it was in the past. Agencies themselves are looking to present better service propositions to clients and become more insightful simply rather than being simply just transactional processes of CVs. And, you know, I guess the value proposition we provide to clients is under threat. That's coupled with the fact that the cost of running a recruitment agency has increased dramatically over time. We're facing mounting pressures from the fact that not only are our costs rising, but clients continually expect to be getting either more value for money or, in fact, to pay less. And that's difficult because ultimately they have their own access to AI and have their own resources and their own tools. And that means that they are able to do what we've always traditionally done, possibly better. And in fact, I read recently a survey from one of the big four firms that showed that the aggregate or average cost of hiring someone when you consider all the internal costs using agencies, using contract staff, versus their ability to do it themselves using AI, it's going to drop dramatically for them as an internal proposition. So the value chasm between outsourcing to us as agencies and actually doing it themselves is going to get wider. So the real challenge is there. It's not hypothetical. It is not in the future. It is now. And we need to look at what we do. And it's an interesting question because agencies, when you think about it commercially, have operated in very inefficient manners in the past. And they've done that when you look at the deployment of their resources, the cost of operating the business, where that money goes, the time that is spent effectively on things that actually produce a result. It hasn't changed much in my 40 years in the industry. Some of the technology's better, but ultimately people aren't that much more productive, if at all. Competition is fierce. There's downward pressure on price and margin, and therefore resources are wasted for no particular reason, simply because we're clumsy about the way we do things. And that just really needs to change if we're going to prosper in the future. So one of the key things to think about here is a productivity crisis. Um, and there's no lack of talent in recruitment, but there's an inefficient distribution of that talent. And so, this is the plight of many professional sporting teams where the really good people are spread across many, many teams, and the concentration of that talent really doesn't have the impact it should. And in recruitment, we have the same problem. Every agency has their superstars, but agencies also have their fair share of people that are in the middle. And in fact, if you can visualize a bell curve, the majority of people in recruitment, in terms of their productivity and output, sit in the middle of that bell curve. And it's not the people at the top that are the problem, and the people at the bottom weed themselves out. It's actually how do we migrate that bell curve to the right in order to get a little bit more productivity out of every single person, which will create massive amounts of more profit and actually make businesses more efficient. However, in the past, the way agencies have approached things is simply to hire more people. And it's a very friction heavy process, an ecosystem where people burn out, but profitability is hard to get. And if you think about why there's friction in the model, most agency owners who analyze their P&L or CFOs in recruitment businesses know that the curse of the recruitment business is that over 50% of net fee income is consumed by people costs, mainly because of legacy operations and mainly because of the way things work and the way that people develop through the industry. And so there are huge inefficiencies in the payout rate or deployment costs of humans in recruitment for the return on investment. And similarly, there's a very inefficient distribution of performance. So although it's a broad average, most permanent recruitment agencies probably complete successfully about 25% of the opportunities they've presented. And again, in other industries, if you only converted 25% of the effort into a result, it'd be very, very difficult to survive, let alone be profitable. And another way to look at this is that you actually waste 75% of the effort. So agencies are paying people, they're paying for offices, telephone systems, sexy new technology, marketing, training, people attending events and networking, only to get 25% return on that time. And those costs go in regardless. So there's a really inefficient conversion of revenue to profit. So there needs to be a pivot where actually the AI is going to start to solve this problem that exists, and that is that the industry is systemically inefficient. And we need to leverage the AI to eliminate the friction and actually restore greater degrees of profitability, even in a market where there's downward pressure on margin. And I really want to explore that in this video today. So we're being squeezed at all ends. The recruitment industry has always been the sort of punching bag for clients, where unlike what I learned at university about economics and supply and demand, in recruitment that doesn't apply because even if there's a scarcity of candidates, clients expect it to be cheaper. So regardless of the supply, the demand wants to pay less and less and less for that resource. Now, we've not really done a lot over the years to look at how we become more efficient as a business. We've simply either hired more people or we ask them to do more volume of activity in order that we expect to convert more in fees. And when the market's buoyant, that works fantastically well. If you're fortunate enough to be in a business with a large volume of contractors, then great. There's a level of consistency about performance. But the reality is we've relied on people and manual labor to actually drive volume. And it's really unsustainable because the cost of those people is getting greater. There's been generational change in the way that people work, and they're not prepared to put in necessarily the hours that, the industry folklore is built upon. And again, effectively, it's difficult, more and more difficult to find people that can do the job the way it needs to be done, particularly in an ever evolving market around AI and technology. So there's a massive gap between value and cost, where we're paying more and more to deliver a service, and the clients are looking to pay less and less to get that service. And that's even exaggerated further by the fact that those companies have access to the same or better technology than we have. So there is a fundamental need to transform. And that's the reason APSCo have created the transformation zone. Because by sitting still and doing nothing and believing the market is simply going to rebound just isn't going to cut it. It's not going to be good enough. And actually, we all need to take proactive steps to really modify the way we operate. And we need to look at our cost base and how we operate that. And AI is a great solution to that problem, where it can take over any number of the tasks currently being performed by people and allow those people to do what they're really, really good at. And that is not staring at a screen for most of their day. So again, there's a paradox about the cost of people. And I've talked about the fact that, you know, over 50% of most agencies' net fee income goes on salaries alone. And that's not including things like training, not including expenses. Um, and it really, really cripples a business up because it's such a marginal game of where does the profit come from. when you hire more people, the productivity of those people is not immediate. Even if they're experienced people, they'll come into your business and they will cost you more than they make you for a period of time. And whilst we've always tolerated that because market volumes and market demands and average fees have always been there to sustain it, that is not going to be the case in the future. Similarly, when people are at the desk, about 70% of their time is spent staring at a screen. And if you think about the type of people we hire into recruitment, typically, they've got extrovert personalities. They are interested in talking to people. They're interested in making deals, and yet they're chained to a screen the majority of their life. And therefore, they're just losing their mojo while they sit there, and they're costing increasingly more and more as a relative percentage of what they're bringing in. So aggregate underperformance of humans is not a way to make profit. We have to find more and more efficient ways to do that. And I would say in the future, particularly as we're talking about AI, you should be regarding the AI as a digital team member, not a piece of technology, but the equivalent of a person. And that person is going to be hyper efficient. And that digital person is going to be able to perform many of the tasks that your current human team do. And what we want to do is get your team doing things that they actually like doing and are in fact much better at. So I've already talked about the screen time, but actually it's just 70% of a recruiter's time is spent on non-value tasks. Spent on admin, data entry, system management, searching on LinkedIn, searching on job boards for people, actually doing things that they are better than, and actually things that they should be avoiding and having the AI do. Because ultimately their value is in the relationship, it's in building trust, it's built in understanding nuance, reading between the lines, you know, building a relationship where the client outsources because they understand the value proposition, not because that person's really, really good at sifting through a lot of CVs. Only 30% of a recruiter's time is spent on high value work. And that high value work is really where they need to be spending more and more of their effort because the market is moving much more to a consultancy based model where not just trust is important, but somebody's ability to problem solve on behalf of their client is even more important. And this pressure becomes exaggerated because Gen Z staff and beyond, the Gen Alphas that are joining the industry over the years to come, they don't want repetition. They want to do things that are far more interesting. They want to do things that are more analytical. They're problem solving. They want to add more value in order that they believe that there's a shared level of investment in solving the problem for the client. So we need to be looking at this as an industry. And it's also important to remember that if you break down the tasks of a recruiter or employees in an agency, in the future, not all those people will do the traditional roles that they currently do in terms of candidate or client facing. In fact, analytics, data, and understanding how to deploy those assets in marketing will become even more critical. So again, I talked at the start of the video about the metrics that matter. And when you look at where people spend their time, there's a disproportionate investment in low return tasks within a business. When an agency is converting something like 25% of the opportunities into fees, where else do they spend their time? And if you examine what people do, and in fact, if you look at your spend by customer data, you'll discover that consultants do spend a lot of their time on very low value generating tasks. And in fact, work with many, many clients that spend once, if at all, during the course of a year in order to generate work. So again, the AI is going to help consultants work closer to the money, to work in a much more efficient manner. And so things like matching are going to change because at the moment it's an observational skill about how does somebody fit a job. And it's evolved with some technology. However, the AI is going to be able to contextually match candidates by not just looking at the CV, looking at the notes, but it will also be able to search things like voice conversations that happen with candidates. And in fact, contextually match those people for things way, way beyond the CV. And in fact, it will create a very, very human type of interaction. So This means that resources are only deployed when it's a more viable opportunity to make a deal, where it's more likely that that candidate will get a job with the client. And therefore, AI in this particular case is solving a problem where at the moment people are bogged down doing too much of the task administration and therefore converting less. And their focus is not on what makes the deal, it's not on what keeps the client happy, it is simply pushing a lot of correspondence and paper out to clients and then converting a very small percentage. Clearly, one of the things that's evolved with AI is the threat of the client. And the client is now a threat to the industry like never before. Now, I've been in the industry a long time, and insourcing versus outsourcing has always been there. However, the clients now have technology that allows them to do the same or more than recruiters do. And when you consider the average cost of a transaction, whether they do it themselves or they outsource it, we have to provide more and more value in order to demonstrate our expertise or specialism in order to compete with the threat that the client will do it themselves. So they have access to job boards, they have access to vast global data pools by using the right technology. Similarly, that technology is integrated with ATS systems and it's automating engagement, and their silver medalist programs are much more highly sophisticated. So we have to adapt in order that we can compete um, in the market with the client themselves and we can demonstrate high value and we don't become obsolete. We've got to become the central function within the value chain, providing strategic insights, providing market data, and consulting beyond the point their internal teams can do. And this comes naturally to agencies, although it's never really been called on. So rather than cosmetic data, we're able to produce deep insights because we do interact with many, many people in specific markets. And that gives us knowledge that our clients just simply can't get because they're busy doing what they do as a business. So there are three pillars to strategic transformation um, around where AI and humans interact. And one is we have to deploy AI agents to automate the first 70% of the journey. That 70% where consultants are spending their time performing tasks needs to be automated, whether that be sourcing, screening, scheduling, data hygiene, to free up people that can do much higher value tasks. Secondly, the financial transformation of an agency needs to be about much more lean operations. We need to be setting our objectives that our overall cost or payout rate of humans and our digital workers through AI agents drops below the 50% barrier. That will expand our EBIT margins, and therefore technology is the one way we can achieve that. So it may be that we still have very highly skilled relationship people earning, really good money, in fact, earning bonuses and commissions, but they're combined with a team of people that are enabling them with data and analytics that work on a completely different pay basis. And that is all augmented by technology and artificial intelligence that is making it a more powerful proposition in the collective, not simply a big group of salespeople in recruitment. And then the third pillar is really about human capital. It's redefining what the role of a recruiter is, because often recruiters are really glorified database administrators, matching to the job, forwarding out CVs. Now, we all know the very successful recruiters are good on relationships and they've got intuition and they can see things that others can't. But the AI is going to make the access to really highly skilled candidates more and more available to everybody. So we need to be better at consulting, negotiating, strategic advice. And that's going to require some transformation in the way you hire and manage people in your own business. And it's also going to require planning in terms of how you transition from your current operating model to an operating model that's fit for purpose in the future. So the lead agency model is there to protect EBIT or bottom line. And again, agencies have often been obsessed by gross margin, but really, if we can protect the EBITDA in a downward pressured market on price, we're going to have to find a way to reduce our cost of delivery and reduce the unit cost of delivery. So once again, it's very difficult to scale a business which is dependent upon aggregating headcount at a high cost. So we've got to get that down. And in fact, we should be targeting more like 30% of our net fee income being expended on people and our digital workforce. And that AI enabled model is really solving that inefficiency problem because it's allowing us to do more at less cost, more efficiently, 24/7 in any language, anywhere. And that's a really important difference because it allows agencies to expand more rapidly and to take on challenges in markets they've never operated in before. So the lean model is the way forward, and we should be looking top down at the business and transforming the way our structures work in order to make it more profitable and feasible. Although it's probably an unkind um, way to describe a recruiter, this is more about relationship architecture than database curation or cleaning. Um, AI agents will be able to handle sourcing, screening, scheduling, database maintenance, all the follow-up communication. Now, a lot of us already have RPA or robotic process automation, but the AI will take that to a whole new level because the learning that the AI does will mean that it's more intuitive and it's actually doing things in a much more human-like manner. We need to build a bridge between the AI and the humans to make sure that the humans are working with clients on the relationship end of the business and the handoff between the two is seamless. So the people trust the AI and they help the AI become better at its job. And therefore, they can then focus on the strategic consulting aspect of the job, complex negotiations, market intel, career advisory, but actually being a trusted partner to their clients. So this is going to be a huge shift in productivity. There's already evidence in the market and research that's saying that people that are in highly AI enabled environments, every skilled recruiter with really good relationship skills is seeing an uptick between 20 and 50% on their fee production across a very short amount of time. And they're doing more to actually affect the relationship. By also moving to an AI enabled environment, it removes the attritional nature of recruitment. We all know how fatiguing it can be. We all know how brutal it can be when you don't get success. But the use of AI is going to bring people closer to performance results, and therefore the gratification for success is closer than ever. But it's also going to challenge agencies on their pricing models. And so perhaps agencies start to pivot towards not just the transactional fee, but actually retained or consultancy fees in order to allow clients to leverage the strategic input they can they can make available. And so recruitment businesses start to morph into more consultancy style organizations than simply transactional CV providers. So how does it look going forward? So there's never been a lack of hard work or dedication in recruitment. I mean, the people that have been in it a long time, the people that put an effort in, the people that go beyond have always done well. But there's always been this misapplication of technology, and it's been seen as being an adjunct. In fact, we all know many good recruiters still work outside of the technology that's there, and they work in inconsistent ways that are not repetitive, are not able to be repeated or replicated, which makes it difficult to scale. So we really need to find a way to use AI to perform all those heavy lifting tasks that allow people to operate on a much more advanced level. AI restores the human in the human relationship and allows our consultants to interact with their customers and their candidates on a much more intimate level. It allows them to convert more of their effort into performance. It allows us to reduce the delivery cost per transaction to empower more profitability. And it allows people to have a much more fruitful relationship and do the things that they really enjoy doing. It allows them to do the things they got into recruitment to do rather than stare at a screen. So strategic re-engineering is not optional. It's absolutely imperative. And again, that's why APSCo's created the transformation zone. And whilst this video and other videos that we're helping produce for APSCo are confrontational in some ways, they're just being real. That if we don't address these systemic inefficiencies in the industry, then profit is going to be even harder to come by. And agencies will become obsolete over time if they don't really figure out a way to add value, to compete with internal hiring, and actually to leverage the technology. And people will leave the industry. So it's a lose-lose equation for those that don't really move forward. And that window is closing rapidly. This isn't something that's going to happen over the next 5 years. This is happening right now, and it's going to happen very quickly. So the future is bright for those agencies that really make the adaptation to more AI-enabled environments. But it's going to be more and more difficult for those that are crippled by the fear of change, or in fact are in a financial position where they can't afford to risk it. What if this is wrong? What if you can still make a good living from having a large number of people operating on a relatively inefficient basis, but the volume is going to solve the problem? But for me, that's too risky. And we need to start looking like a more mature industry, reflective of what we've seen in other service sectors. So the goal, it's not to automate the recruiter. It's to take the robotic processes and tasks out of the recruiter's day and allow them to operate on a more human level, to restore their purpose, to allow them to operate at a more professional level, to allow them to enjoy what they do and, really not steal their soul by having them chained to a screen all day, but allow them to get out there and old school shake hands with clients and candidates. Tech and AI is going to enable agencies to scale faster, more globally, across vertical disciplines, without the increase in marginal costs that they traditionally have to go and incur in order to expand. And it's going to create excellence because the devil's in the detail, and recruiters will be able to focus much more on the detail about the consulting level of what they do rather than just simply the volume of what they do. So the future of recruitment is secure. The future of agencies is there. It's just about embracing the change required in order to be there. The AI is not a threat. The AI is solving some fundamental systemic problems that have existed in the industry for years, and now is the time to change them. And this is where we move from transactional recruiters to trusted advisory uh, providers in the real true consultancy space. So I hope you found this video interesting. I hope that it's challenged some of your thinking. I would encourage you to visit the APSCo Business Transformation Zone. There's a lot more content there. There's a lot more interesting, thought-provoking things that you will find. And I look forward to catching up with you at an APSCo event in the not too distant future. Thanks for listening.